This goes back to April 20th, and that's a game that Matt Martin hit Jacob Trouba. And I told Matt yesterday it's all his fault. He started this whole thing. And, if you're Jim Dolan and you live on Long Island and, your number one rival is basically steamrolling your team 3 games in a row, 6-1 in that game, and then 2 shutouts after that, you basically have had enough. Because coming into those games, the Rangers had won 4 against the Devils, who were shorthanded, and they looked like, okay, they found their game and everything was going to be great. So none of this was thought to be happening in the middle of April until that game that happened on the island. And that's when Matt hit Trouba, and then that's when the season took like a left-hand turn. Now, they won some games against Buffalo and one against Philadelphia, but they got wiped out again by the Islanders. And I was at the game where the Rangers were playing the Flyers at home. And this is one of the games that the Rangers lost, and Jim Dolan was there. And he was pissed that night, and you could tell it. Now, I also think this has something to do with Glenn Sather.
Glenn Sather?
That's right. Glenn Sather is still involved. Glenn Sather is still an advisor. Glenn Sather was back. Is he an
official advisor?
Yes.
Okay.
He was back. He's like chairman emeritus or whatever they call him. But, he was back in town a few weeks ago. And, he knows, and if you know anything about Glenn Sather.
Well, who does? The guy disappears. He lives in the shadows.
Well, I mean, he's basically removed himself. There's no question about it. But if you know anything about him and you know anything about the way he thinks about hockey, it's very similar to the way that Lou Lamoriello thinks about hockey. Let's have some skill players, but we better have some guys that are going to be on this roster that are going to be backing people up. We're not going to be taking flyers on the Julien Gauthiers of the world that, are former number 1 draft picks who are, great skaters, but are not the physical types that are going to be able to protect the young kids and protect your best player. So you start there on April 20th. You see how the better teams basically started to manhandle the Rangers. And then on top of that, you get your best player ragdolled in his home building, and there's nothing done about it. And there's nothing done about it in the moment because the Rangers don't have anybody to do anything about it in the moment. And then yesterday, they can pat themselves on the back all they want. It's fine. Yeah, they all stood for each other. The room's really tight. Too little, too late. There's going to be guys that are going to no longer going to be here. And Chris Drury now is in a very, very, very difficult situation because he's a BU guy. Quinn is a BU guy, the coach. Drury now has been handed the keys to his franchise. Now, Sather's going to be right there with him. He's going to be overseeing a lot of this stuff. Now, he doesn't have like the official title of, I'm over, president or anything, because Drury has exactly what Sather had when Sather was here. He's got control of the entire team. He's the president and the general manager. Now, a little bit different for the Rangers when it comes to being the president. Normal presidents for hockey teams, are on the business side and on the hockey side, and they kind of commingle. That's not the case for the Rangers. If you're the president of the Rangers, you're a president of hockey operations. That's what you are. You are a hockey guy. The business will be handled by MSG and all the people over there that do the business for the team. They don't need, ex-players running around and entertaining clients because when the Rangers are good, they sell themselves and everybody wants to go to the games when we're all allowed to go back to the games. So this is going to be all on Chris Drury now, and he's going to have to figure out how this team is going to get tougher. I'm sick that JD and Jeff Gorton basically lost their jobs. I felt like they were trying to do the right thing, but they didn't protect their young players. And when you have happened to what happened to them here now the last part of the season, and they're going out with a whimper, the owner felt like he had to do something and he had to make an example of somebody.
But why now and not wait a little bit? I mean, I felt like the consensus from a lot of Ranger fans yesterday was, we're building. I know this year was disappointing. I know what just happened was pretty embarrassing, but let's take this off season to restructure this roster. That's what it felt like from a lot of Ranger fans.
So in a normal season, there's a very good chance that the Rangers could have been the 7th or 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. But because of the way that this schedule was done, because of COVID-19, and because they have to be in this division with those 4 teams that have been hammering these guys, over the course of the season, that this was going to end up, somebody was going to end up losing their job, whether it be the coach, the general manager, or in this case, the president as well. I mean, there are a lot of Ranger fans that are tired of David Quinn, but he didn't put the team together. Jeff Gorton and JD put the team together, and the team has a lot of talent. There's no.
Do you
question
agree
about
that the timing right now was the thing?
I understand.
The way to go?
I understand why it happened because I as a Ranger fan, I was embarrassed by the way.
If you're
they were
running
playing.
the team, you would have done the same thing.
I would have done something. It would have been something.
Well, something, and what happened yesterday was
huge.
It was a big deal yesterday.
I would have either fired the coach, or I would have fired the general manager. I did, JD. We all love JD. We all know that he's got a good reputation. I don't know what kind of true hockey guy he is in the sense of how he runs the team in terms of decision making, but there was obviously something missing on this team going into this season within this division. And you can see it when they play the top 4 teams in the division, just how overwhelmed they get and how the fourth lines for these other teams all score goals against their own fourth line, who's a hodgepodge of guys who are still trying to figure out whether or not they belong in the NHL or not.
Yeah.
So it's a real, and look, Jim Dolan wants this team in the playoffs. And I guess, this is an edict to tell Chris Drury, hey, my team is not going to get ragdolled in my home building anymore, or my team is not going to be embarrassed by the Islanders anymore. It's a ruthless way of doing things, and there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be upset because both Gorton and JD have great relationships and reputations within the NHL. We understand all that. They're not getting rid of Lafreniere. They're not getting rid of Kakko. They're not getting rid of any of those guys unless Chris Drury is going to swing for the fences. And if he swings for the fences, that means he's going to be going after Jack Eichel up in Buffalo.
Yeah.
That would be a swing for the fences.
You know what it feels like to me? It feels like, the Knicks are good. Jim Dolan's bored. This team was underachieving. I'm going to come in and start messing with this team now.
Did I not sit here and tell you in the last 5 days that guys are going to be losing their jobs?
Yeah, I don't.
Did I say that? I said somebody's losing their job because of the way that they're finishing this season.
This felt like a shock to everybody.
And the moment that they were knocked out of the playoffs was the moment that that was the final straw.
Yeah.
And whether or not there were internal discussions that JD needs to fire Gorton because JD was going to save his job, or whatever. I don't know how all that stuff went down. But this again, remember, it feels like a Sather thing to me. This is like something that an old hockey guy would do. Like he would come in and say, you know what, this team is just not doing what it's supposed to be doing. I don't like the way it looks, and we got to make a change. I sat there yesterday. I wasn't stunned. I kind of had a little bit of a tip around 11:30 yesterday morning that something was happening. I didn't think JD was going. I knew that Gorton was going. Let's put it that way. And I like Jeff, and I think Jeff tried to do it, and he got lucky. He got a couple high draft picks.
Yeah, the Lafreniere thing.
He got the Lafreniere, the Kakko thing. They got lucky in the in the lottery and things of that nature. But what's surprising to me is that Jeff was a part of the Boston Bruins, and when the Boston Bruins had a fourth line that had Marchand and Lucic on it, and Marchand and Lucic just basically ran over the Rangers in a playoff series, and then all of a sudden those guys. Marchand became the player that he became over time, and Lucic ended up getting rid of. But, he knows what the league still is. It's still a skill league for the most part for 82 games when you get back to the regular season. There's a lot of open ice, and there's a lot of skill that's being shown, and the rules are trying to, show some of that skill. The Connor McDavids of the world, the Austin Matthews of the world, the players like that. And the Rangers hope that they have players that will turn into that. But you cannot have your team look like it has looked the last 2 weeks of the season. You just can't.
Yeah, I just want to say something about last night and the way it was handled. So, to me, there was basically no winning with the Rangers because I know your opinion on it is, too little, too late. We should have seen this before. But think about it. If the Rangers don't do anything last night, they're called out again. If the Rangers get dirty and start doing stuff that's illegal and getting themselves suspended, then they're basically doing what that statement said that should never happen in the NHL, and then now they're doing it. They look hypocritical. So to me, this was the only way to do it, which was to fight constantly, to make a mockery out of the game, to square up with these guys and show some toughness in the game. Now, I know you should have done this weeks ago, and it led to the firings of guys. But just with this, what happened last night, to me, this was the best that they could do.
I'm not
the best that they could do.
They were making a statement last night. They wanted to make it into a farce. And they
did.
And they wanted and again, the other thing too to remember here is the Rangers put out a statement yesterday, and they want George Parros out of the freaking player safety position. That's unprecedented. That's never been happened before.
Where did that come from?
So that's the question. Like, who decided to write that, and who decided to put that out? And did they ask Jim Dolan whether or not that statement should have went out?
Or did it come from Jim Dolan?
Yeah, I don't know. But my thing is that I can't believe that the NHL would be very happy that a member club would be calling out somebody in player safety.
Well,
George, and by the way, this whole thing reading why there was no suspension for Tom Wilson because there was a scrum in front of the goaltender, and scrums happen all the time.
Sure.
And we look at that completely different than we look at open ice hits and hits in the corner and all this other crap and headshots and all this. That needs to be amended. The NHLPA needs to step up here and say,
hey, where have they been?
Come on, where have they been? They've been getting their ass kicked for so long. It doesn't matter. It doesn't, they're worse than the NFLPA.
Yeah.
So do they really give a crap about protecting their own players? I mean, that's what they're supposed to be doing. They probably would be fighting more for Tom Wilson had he be suspended. It's a weird time for the Rangers. It was it was shocking. Yes, I figured somebody was going to lose their job. I just didn't think that JD was going to be a part of it. I figured either was going to be Gorton or Quinn.
Yeah.
And it still may be Quinn. But now you have this weird, this thing between Gorton, Quinn, and Drury is all Boston. These are all Boston guys, BU guys. At least Quinn and Drury are. But now we got to find out whether or not Drury's got the chops to do this. Because this is gonna take some very hard decisions,
and we're not gonna know. Nobody's gonna know until we start seeing.
Until the offseason.
And how much is Glenn Sather going to be involved now that you're telling me that he was heavily involved in this whole thing?
He's a side by side, and he will be advising Chris Drury. So he will
just
be
take his old job back then.
Because he's 80. What 80?
Well, he's pulling all the strings as it is. So what's the difference?
I think he just sees a team, and remember, when he was here with the Rangers, you can say whatever you want about him, not winning the Stanley Cup and all that other stuff. But, he had guys like Brandon Prust and Colton Orr and Mike Rupp on the team. He had those guys out there because you knew when he was in Edmonton, he had Marty McSorley. He had Mark Messier. He had guys that would protect people like Wayne Gretzky. Nobody was touching Wayne Gretzky.
I could make a case that the most powerful man in New York sports is the person that has Jim Dolan's ear. Because there's two teams there. I think that he trusts certain people.
Yeah.
And then he's the one who makes final decisions on two of the biggest franchises in the city.
I'm just telling you, as a Ranger fan, and I heard Pierre say this last night. And
Pierre McGuire?
Yeah, and part of it is very accurate. There are good players, and we got lucky with the draft, and you can see that the defensemen that we have, especially guys like Adam Fox and Keandre Miller and Ryan Lindgren, are really going to be good players. But, they're still young kids. None of those guys got in fights last night. They were probably told, don't you fight. You guys, you can get some autographs if you want, but just don't fight. Because none of those guys fought. It was all the veterans that were fighting and everything else. And I do give Brendan Smith a lot of credit. I mean, it takes a lot of guts to go in there against, Tom Wilson, knowing that you're going to get your ass kicked. I think we were probably 1 of 6 in the fights last night. The other, maybe there were 3 draws because they were slapping each other, but at the end of the day, somebody still had to go after Tom Wilson. Then, oddly enough, he doesn't come back because of an upper body. I don't believe that.
Yeah, but and the Rangers kind of
his brain is going, firing on all wrong cylinders.
Sure, right. No, they got him out of there because they're out of hand already. It would have gotten even more out of hand. We all know that. But the attention went away from the NHL because of what the Rangers did, and that's a shame because the NHL still has major issues when it comes to the player safety situation. And what happened last night is the last thing that the league wants. I mean, you don't see viral videos in the NHL for special goals and stuff like that. And think about the TJ Oshie story. This guy loses his father in his mid-50s to Alzheimer's. There was a big, when the Capitals won the Cup, that was a very special moment he was able to share with his dad. He has a hat trick last night. He's crying on the bench. That should be a great moment for the NHL to show one of its star players an emotional moment. And instead, what's the video that's out there is guys dropping the gloves 3 different fights at the opening faceoff that never stop for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, well,
it's a joke. So the league is looked at by a lot of people as a joke. because of stuff like this.
Well, I think that the Rangers tried to make a point that if Tom Wilson had been suspended for the rest of the season,
this wouldn't have happened. Yeah.
I thought it should have been more significant, but then again, who knew
$5,000 fine?
Who knew that there was a scrum rule that guys like Wilson now can basically use that rule to their to their
do whatever you want.
Not worry about getting suspended because you're
shank some guys in there.
Scrum.
Yeah, shank some guys in the scrum
trying to protect the goalie.